What's up guys, Seville here with another Power Rangers Lightning Collection action figure review. Today, I'll be talking about the brand new 2-pack featuring the Lost Galaxy Red Ranger as well as the In-Space Psycho Red Ranger. Continuing the Lightning Collection package design so far, each side of the box does feature artwork showcasing the characters involved. Then on the back side, we have the promotional images featuring the figures themselves. On the top, you have the two red tones split by a lightning bolt, then the bottom has all the copyright information, and plus the barcode, which I'll leave on screen here, long enough to potentially aid in your hunt. After that, if you can give me just a few more seconds, I'll have these figures out of their package. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and comment below. And if you want to see more from me, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. So I didn't even realize these figures were available yet until I happened to walk into GameStop and seen a couple sets on the shelf. I immediately grabbed one for myself. Just for the sake of information, there's a little bit of confusion about why this set exists, because a lot of people don't seem to know that there actually was a fight between these two Rangers on an episode of Lost Galaxy. I do find it interesting that Hasbro has now made two separate sets of figures based on single episode occurrences rather than ongoing conflicts. However, it might just go to show exactly how deep the Lightning Collection might get. Now, let's take a good close look at the Lost Galaxy Red Ranger. This figure is a perfect example of exactly what the base sculpt of the Lightning Collection looks like. Essentially, from the neck down, this figure could potentially be repainted to fit any base Ranger from the entire series. Aside from the helmet and the belt, this figure will probably be the primary body block of the Lightning Collection going forward. All of the main sculpting details could easily carry forward to most Ranger styles. The helmet for this figure is sculpted really well, but when you get in close, it does have some paint flaws. Unfortunately, paint flaws is a common theme with this figure. The edges of the black lines tend to be uneven or smudged. It's also fairly difficult to keep the lines straight and connected at the articulation points. Plus, the black designs on the gloves and the boots also have their own flaws. The overall qualities of the black paint are inconsistent at best. Hopefully, by the time they get around to releasing other Lost Galaxy Rangers, these issues will be improved upon. Moving into the accessories, starting with the unmasked head sculpt, it doesn't look bad, but it's still not quite where I think they should be with these yet. For whatever reason, the Lightning Collection hasn't been quite on par with what the Marvel Legends have been doing with their head sculpts. For the most part, I don't really see myself displaying the unmasked heads very often. His other accessories include the sword, his dagger, the energy effect, as well as these two extra hands, which are just reused parts from previous Rangers, so I'm going to move straight on to the sword and dagger. Both of these are sculpted, detailed, and painted very, very well. Both blades have different symbols and writing etched into each side. Unfortunately, if you display the sword with the energy effect, you're going to totally cover all that up. There's a hole in the bottom of the effect that runs straight up the center for you to slide the sword all the way into. Thus, if you use the effect, the only thing you'll really see of the sword is the hilt itself. Next up, let's go ahead and take a look at the articulation. I'm not going to repeat this segment on the Psycho Ranger, simply because with the Lost Galaxy Ranger being the very base body, it's going to be the best example of the overall Lightning Collection. The head does have a fairly wide range of movement up and down, as well as full rotation side to side. The shoulders do have the butterfly joints for increased front to back motion, as well as full rotation all the way around, and the outward motion as well. The biceps do have full rotation, and the double jointed elbows do crunch fairly tightly. The wrists also have full rotation, as well as pegs for up and down movement. The upper torso is on a ball joint for full 360 movement, and when coupled with the ab crunch, makes for great range, leaning backwards or forwards. Unfortunately, the hip movement on the Lightning Collection isn't very wide. You would think for a Power Ranger, they'd be able to do a standing sidekick fairly easily. But alas, this is as high as they get, whether sideways or forward. Moving down the rest of the leg though, the thigh cut does have full rotation, the double jointed knees do crunch really well, there is also rotation at the top of the boot, and the ankle does have a full range of pivot motion. So with all that said about the Lost Galaxy Ranger, now it's time to move on to the Psycho Ranger. I'm going to take the lightning hand off just so it's not quite as much of a distraction while we look at all the details on this figure. Unlike the Lost Galaxy Ranger, this one has a very unique sculpt. At least until more Psycho Rangers get made, and we already know there's a blue one on the way. As far as I can tell, there are absolutely no parts that carry over from the baseline of figures to this one. While the overall concepts remain the same, the actual sculpts are truly unique. As far as the Lightning Collection Ranger figures are concerned, the Psycho Ranger is the most detailed so far. On top of all the incredibly sculpted lines, the paint apps on this figure is immaculate compared to the Lost Galaxy Ranger. Just every little rivet, wrinkle, and plate of armor are done just about perfectly. I never did get any of the Bandai Psycho Rangers, just because I knew they weren't going to be able to complete the team before they lost the license. But now that I see this, I wish I'd got one to be able to compare it to. But I honestly can't imagine it being anywhere close to the quality of this. One thing I do think is interesting is that his chest armor is treated just like the shields on the white and green Rangers. It's a softer material on top of the main figure and can be moved around ever so slightly in order to not block some of the articulation. But even the torso piece underneath still has a high level of detail sculpted into it. Moving on to the accessories, aside from the extra hands, his primary accessory is the sword. It definitely doesn't look bad, but it's not as detailed as the Lost Galaxy sword. When it comes to swapping out the hands, I do want to point out that the white wrist gauntlets do come off. They're not overly loose, but I can imagine them getting lost if you're not paying attention when you take the hands off. They do fit back on pretty snugly, and once you put the hands back on, there's no way it would ever just come off by itself. And the last thing I do want to note is that there is a soft wrap on the sword's handle that can be placed around the hand that's holding it. So with all that said, it's time to run these figures through my guidelines for a complete and fair review. While the Lost Galaxy Ranger does reuse a lot of parts from previously made figures, the Psycho Ranger is a totally new sculpt. Between the two, the Psycho Ranger is definitely the most detailed, but the Lost Galaxy Ranger does have the details where it counts. Both figures are accurate to the characters and do have more than 20 points of articulation. They are in the scale with the rest of the Lightning Collection and do balance pretty well. Each figure did include its own accessories, and the roughly $40 price point is fair for a 2-pack. The main problem with this set is the quality control issues on the paint apps with the Lost Galaxy Ranger. Plus, for now, accessibility seems to be kind of scarce because delivery to stores seems to be kind of sporadic. Thus leading to an 8 out of 10 star rating, meaning they are excellent and a must own for all fans. However, if they do become more available, they will bump up to a 9. Therefore, if you are fans of these characters, I do highly recommend adding them to your Lightning collection. Thank you guys for watching, and if you like this video,
get over here!
And subscribe to Civilian Collectibles.